Brainbox.
Company lays off hundreds of workers, gives them blank taxi checks to travel home. Mayhem ensues. Tonight I caught a taxi home, and the taxi driver was telling me a great story I think might qualify for your malicious compliance subreddit. About 20 years ago a big company made hundreds of workers redundant for no good reason, except for cost savings. I think it was an airline company, which is ironic for what happens next. So these workers were made unemployed and are rightfully upset. At the farewell shindig, employees were given blank taxi checks to get home safely. Here in Australia these are called cab charge vouchers. They are essentially a blank check to catch the taxi anywhere and are charged back to the company's expense. Now, the important thing to remember here is the cost for the taxi fare was being debited to the company that fired the workers. Another thing to note is these cab charge vouchers were very popular in corporate Australia 2002-2010, but I don't know if they are anymore. The idea was company employees could get drunk in the city at a special event and catch a taxi home on the company dime. So, these hundreds of employees are in the city of Melbourne for an end of year breakup, but many of them have no job to return to. How are they going to spend their last day as an employee? At the end of the night, after a few drinks, the plan unfolds. Dozens of ex-employees start catching taxi cabs to far-flung and exotic locales all over Australia. Some catch taxis to Geelong, 1 hour's drive. Some to Bendigo, 2 hours drive. Some to Sydney, 10 hours drive. One enterprising individual made it all the way to Cairns, 32 hours drive. Essentially like a down under version of its same mad world. All expenses being debited to the company that had just made them unemployed. Needless to say, the taxi drivers couldn't believe their luck at this huge payday. The taxi driver tonight was telling me all the old timers still talk about that night. An entertaining story. Don't want me to warn you, or even talk while you drive. Okay, insert crashing noise. Not a long story, but here you go. A few weeks ago my fiancé was driving, and I'm in the passenger seat. I'm a very defensive driver myself, and being military I'm always looking around for things that could hit us, since most military vehicles have major blind spots. She however is stubborn, and hates it when I tell her what to do when she is in the wrong or not paying attention. Anyway, we are on our way to the movies and we finally found a parking spot, but didn't see it until last second, so she pulled into an alley in order to turn back around. As she goes to back up I noticed a car coming, and I didn't think she saw it, so I told her to stop. The car turned and never went past us, so she got all pissy. She yelled at me to shut up and never side seat drive again. Well okay then, this won't bite you in the ass later. Fast forward a couple weeks later, and we go to see the movie Endgame. Don't worry, no spoilers. We have almost an exact same scenario. Misses a spot, had to turn around, and just as she starts to back up, a car is coming. I see it, and just start laughing. A loud honk can be heard followed by screeching tires, and we felt a light tap on the car that coincides with taillight glass breaking. Oh, I was laughing so hard. Of course she starts yelling at me and asking me why I didn't say anything. So I just said, I thought I wasn't supposed to say anything. No side seat driving, remember? Oh, she didn't like that. I was loving it however. So needless to say she no longer bitches at me when I side seat drive. In case anyone is wondering why I don't drive, it's because she gets car sick when I drive. Want country music? Okay then. I was in the car with my mother when I connected my phone to the speaker and started playing Sympathy for the Devil by the Rolling Stones. She then told me that she would only allow me to play country music while she was in the car. I said okay, sure. Then the perfect country song came to mind. I started playing it, and by the time the words I got the horses in the back were playing, my mother was telling me to turn it off because it wasn't country music. At that point I simply went to Google and searched the genre, with the primary genre being country. I showed that to her and she stopped complaining soon after because I did follow her guidelines. TL. Dr. Mom told me I could only play country music in car, so I turned on Old Town Road. You want fresh air? Sure. I don't entirely remember the conversations as it was about a year ago, but I'll do my best to describe what happened. I'm a part-time waitress slash barista in a small coffee shop with not that brilliant air conditioning, making the coffee shop rather hot in the summer. It's just about bearable, however, and usually once we explain the issue, our customers are understanding. Because people often order cokes and other sugary drinks in the summer, we are a hotspot for wasps and bees, like a lot, meaning that we cannot open the windows. I live in England and last summer we experienced some of the hottest weather we have had in some time, thus meaning the little coffee shop was almost unbearable. Most customers I explained this to were very understanding and just took off jumpers accordingly. However, this was only most people. It was towards the end of a busy lunch shift, so the coffee shop had mostly emptied out by the time rude mother, RM, and her children appeared. We were half an hour off closing, so, with reluctance, we gave her a table under the air conditioning and took her order. She did not appear to be exceptionally rude to begin with, so we happily brought over her drinks and food, many of which contained copious amounts of jam, a favorite of the famed wasps. As we brought over her drinks, she began to shout at us to open the windows. We had to explain that we couldn't, because then the wasps would come in and head straight for her food and drinks. She began to gain a persistence never before seen by the staff of the coffee shop. As many customer service workers will know, the customer is always right, so I began opening the windows around her table, and only her table, meaning everyone else could eat in peace. As the wasps began to accumulate around her table, me and my co-workers watched with anticipation as she began trying to swat them away, shouting at us to do something. We did nothing but watch the scene as it unfolded before us. She ended up storming out of the coffee shop without paying for anything she had ordered and started shouting at the staff that worked in the shop. A few weeks later I found out that her and her kids had been escorted off the premises and now can't come anywhere near my workplace. The master of malicious compliance. A few years ago, I was in the process of getting my master's degree. Our group for that particular degree was fairly small, about a dozen of us when we started, and a few dropped out along the way, so the lectures and seminars were tiny, and we all got to know each other well. It wasn't uncommon for classes to continue for several hours over beers down the pub. All in all, a pretty great way to learn. The leader of the program, who also taught one of the units, was awesome. Very anti-establishment punk who just wanted to get on with teaching his subject his way. The higher-ups were in the process of trying to change how everything worked, basically making it much tougher on the students and a lot more bureaucratic because reasons. One thing they changed was extensions for assignments. The way it used to work was you'd have a deadline, but if you needed an extension, the lecturer for that unit could grant one at their discretion. The new process meant that if you needed an extension you'd have to apply to the extensions board, and you wouldn't know if you'd had it approved or not until well past the deadline. You basically had to gamble if you applied for the extension and handed in past the deadline and your extension wasn't granted at all or wasn't granted for enough time, you'd get a failing mark for being late. It was super stressful, especially for those of us with ongoing reasons for needing them. For instance, me with my health issues. This angered the program leader a lot. As far as he was concerned, it's his course. He knows us all well enough to smell bullshit excuses. His say should be good enough to grant an extension. He carried on handing them out anyway, while they were in the process of changing the system, getting into a lot of trouble in the process, but once it was fully changed over, his power to grant them was gone. There was only one major assignment left at this point, the thesis. Most of our class ended up needing extensions for it. Sick children, bereavement, illnesses, other life stuff that meant you couldn't spend 50 to 60 hours every week on it to meet the deadline. We were all preparing to take the gamble, collect as much evidence as possible, and submit all the ridiculous paperwork in the hope that our entire degree wouldn't be taken away from us thanks to a board of pencil pushers who didn't even know us. A couple of days before the deadline, the course leader gets in touch to gleefully inform us that the morons in charge took away his extension powers, but not his powers to change the actual deadline dates. He figured the best thing to do was to move the deadline 6 months into the future, giving us all more than enough time to not only finish our work, but keep improving on it, as an extra special fuck you to the people stressing out his students and messing with his course. We all graduated, and they couldn't do much about it, because he was working perfectly within the rules.